How's it going, YouTube? This is Levi from Bayfoils, and we are back with another video today. But instead of talking about electric hydrofoils and tips and tricks and how to get better or reviews, today we're going to be talking about foiling, just as a general topic. Thanks to this new article that just dropped. Is foiling the future of surfing from the Inertia? And boy howdy, did this bring up some feelings. So we're gonna get into the weeds today. We're gonna talk about the surf culture in the United States and globally. We're gonna talk about the surfing industry, which is different than surf culture. We're gonna talk about the history of surfing, and we're gonna talk about what surfing is in 2023 and how it's changed. Stay tuned. It's gonna be a doozy. It's gonna be a lot of facts, and it's also gonna be a lot of opinions. So before we get into it, if you're new, like and subscribe. If you came here looking for more efoil content, don't be discouraged. These videos are going to be less common, but are still equally important because this is a real thing that's happening. So, like and subscribe, and let's get into it. So, let's take a look at some of the reactions from this article. Is foiling the future of surfing? People had some feelings about this one. No, dumb question. Next. Well, since foiling isn't surfing, I say no. Laughing face. With 36 replies. I'd love to see you on a shortboard. See, this is the funny thing about social media. It empowers clowns like you to literally call me out with zero knowledge of my abilities. Go ahead, keyboard king. Traditional surfing is like getting to second base. Fun, but just heavy petting. Foil surfing is like sliding into home plate. Only a foiler knows the feeling. Everyone here complaining are a bunch of prudes. That's an interesting take. This is my favorite. The future of surfing. Surfing. Like, is golf the future of surfing? Who cares as long as you are in the ocean and feeling the glide? Wow. A reasonable person. This one's probably the GOAT and kind of sums up what I'm going to be talking about. Your typical shortboarder hates suppers, longboarders, bodyboarders, all foilers, kayak people, kiteboarders, other shortboarders they don't know, their friend that's too aggressive at catching waves, people on pop-ups, people on foam boards, tourist swimmers, skimboarders, bodyboarders, fishermen, unless if they're fishing, the entire country of Brazil, boat traffic, people towing on skis, unless they're towing, people learning to surf, wave pools, unless if they're at that pool, groms that are too good. And don't forget, any surfer around them that's not at or near a professional level is a kook. Shoo! Yep. All fun and jokes aside, these are people with real feelings about their idea of what surfing is. So, if you are very much not aware of the history of surfing, I definitely recommend watching this video, The Complicated History of Surfing by Scott Laderman. This is the very educational 5 minutes. Go watch it, pause this video, go watch it right now, and then come back, because I'm not going to talk about what he talks about in the video. I'm going to add on to it. I'm assuming you went and watched this video and you kind of have a good baseline of understanding of the Polynesians that kind of have the first recorded history of surfing, and you can kind of understand how it's kind of changed in, the past 60 years. We're going to use the indigenous people who kind of are credited with inventing this sport and art that we love, and define surfing as, riding waves. It's recorded that the ancient Polynesians would surfed canoes, kayaks. There are other vessels, not board vessels, but other boats on the water before surfboarding became kind of the de facto method of surf. That's kind of how I'm going to define surfing. It doesn't matter what you're riding as long as you're riding a wave. Whether you're on a stand-up board, a boogie board, no board, surfboard, or a canoe, outrigger, or even a foil board. It doesn't matter, you're still surfing if you're riding wave energy. That's kind of, a good definition of what surfing is based on the people who kind of have the oldest history of it. Where it gets problematic is the interesting history of not just the surfboard industry, but also of surf culture across the globe. We're going to talk about the surfboard industry first, because that's going to give us kind of a more objective lens on what surfing is and why this article is a thing. The very first surf industry was surf tourism. Just like if you watch that video, you can the very first people to take surfing to the mainland also had the reverse effect of bringing surfers to Hawaii. Now, where it comes into kind of this cultural clash is where, when we look back at the video, first Christian missionaries to Hawaii and in plantation period thought it was like a savage behavior, being nude in the water. Very colonial mindset. But this was a cultural tie over. And so surfing kind of almost died out because the colonial period kind of instilled in the indigenous Hawaiian people that surfing was not good. If you wanted to be a good Catholic, you had to stop surfing naked in the water. So surfing almost died. So when surf tourism started creating a renewed interest in this sport, of course, people wanted to highlight it. They wanted to blow it up so that they could preserve this art form. This is where we start seeing the first kind of localism backlash towards the industry, where the local surfers have one particular way of surfing, and the industry, tourism, is selling a different way of surfing. And this becomes a trend in the next 60 years of the surf industry doing one thing and surfers, just individuals, doing another. And their interaction isn't always on the same wavelength. Now, I'm not going to get super into surf localism and locals only clubs and gatekeeping of surfing that still exists to this day. If you want to learn about that stuff, watch another video. But what we need to know about localism and gatekeeping in surfing for this particular is foiling the future of surfing is how people learned how to surf. Back in the 50s and 60s, people learned to surf by going to a surf school, a beach boy, and learn to surf from somebody who already knew the craft. There was no books, there was no videos, there was no YouTube on how to learn to surf. So you needed an instructor, a guide, a kumu, whatever you want to call it. And part of learning to surf was also learning the rules of the waterway, all the taboos, the kapu, if you remember from the video. And this is important because, there is some danger to surfing. And when you learn, it's just like when you learn to drive a car, you learn the safety, the rules of the road so that everyone is safe. Same with surfing. When you learn from a kimu and they taught you the ways of the ocean, how to read it, all that stuff, that was a certain sort of indoctrination that you go through so that everyone is kind of on the same level. Again, not going to get super into it, but what we need to remember is that there was a sort of community ownership of surfing that give people today a sort of, how should I say it? It's an entitlement on how to vet people in the water due to the cultural practices of our forefathers. That aspect of learning how to surf from the local who knows the wave, who knows the culture there, who knows the people, and, passing that down to the next generation is intrinsic to surf culture. And so people feel that they have the ability to decide whether foiling is surfing or not based on that cultural practice of learning from your local elder or respected community member. Fast forward to the 70s and 80s when when surfing was blowing up in the United States and Australia. Biggest change in surfing, windsurfing. In the 70s and 80s, you had these guys that were putting sailing rigs onto surfboards and not using wave power to surf, but using wind power, which, if you look at the history of sailing, there's so many more places in the world that you can sail versus surf. There's wind on lakes, there's wind on rivers that you have no surf on. So when windsurfing took off, it blew up in places like Europe, in North America, especially like the Gulf, in Africa, in everywhere. Windsurfing blew up for a good reason. It was much more accessible for a bigger population. Surfing is really reliant on coastal conditions. And so when windsurf started really taking off, they started manufacturing more windsurfing because that was more accessible on a global scale. Now let's take a look at the landscape in the past 10 years with foiling. Foiling adds an extra layer on top of whatever surf discipline you're doing. Keep that in mind about the windsurf revolution and look at the past 10, 15 years of the water sports scene. We see what I'm just going to call the foil revolution. A bunch of different water sports disciplines now. Board sports, wake, tow, kite, wind, traditional surf. We've seen people putting foils on basically every craft. And it adds a whole nother level to all the sports. With windsurf, it makes it easier for upwind or if there's some chop. With surf, it allows you to get crazy fast down the line speeds, but also the maneuverability of like a shortboard. So it's taking surfing, which is already at a 10, and cranking it to 11. Obviously, the manufacturers who are in the business of selling the coolest, newest stuff have seen how foiling is kind of revolutionizing every discipline. And they're doubling down on foiling and manufacturing a bunch, which means going forward, there's going to be a lot of foils out there. And this is where there's that big disconnect between the industry and the individual. Obviously, foiling is the future for the industry. It's a repeat of the windsurf era. We're going to see more and more percentage of new manufactured boards cater to foiling versus traditional. It's already like that in the windsurf and kite surf scene. It's a majority of riders out there are on foils. And so where people took it real personal is that, a lot of people don't want change. They like surfing. They're not going to foil. That's it. Because realistically, foiling is really hard. Like, especially foil surfing, if you have no experience with foiling, going from prone foil surfing is probably the hardest way to learn how to foil. But realistically, it's going to get to the point where just like you have your surfboard quiver, you have your shortboard, you have your fun board, you have your gun, and you pick the board based on your wave, the conditions, where you're at. The foil is just going to be another board in your quiver. You're gonna bust it out when you're at a foil wave, or its conditions are kind of mushy. It's kind of childish to react the way that some of these people have reacted, like taking it like a personal attack on surfing. Like nobody wants you to surf anymore, and you have to foil, otherwise you're not cool. I don't know. I think some people took it a little too personal. Ultimately, foiling, the future of surfing, is going to depend on a lot of things. It's going to depend on economies of scale. If boards can get to the price level that more people are comfortable with, because I didn't even mention it before, but for a lot of people, efoiling is how they get into foiling, and efoils are not cheap and very much deserve some of the ire that they get for being kook vessels, because they're expensive and they take out all of the learning curve with learning to surfboard. Well, jealousy is a natural human emotion, and seeing somebody having a lot of fun because they have money to afford it can make you feel bad that I don't have that money to buy that cool fun toy. I want to do that, so I'm just going to not like it because I have my own feelings to work through. That's where you have to, you know, look inside yourself and figure out, is it really the efoiler or the foiler who has the money to buy that cool stuff, or is it really an internal thing? But I'm not here to call people out on their personal feelings. I'm here to talk about foils. End of the day, there's a lot of complicated socioeconomic things going down with surfers and the future of surfing, foiling, you know. And there's localism, there's the haves and the haves nots, there's the old mentality of gatekeeping who is allowed to use the water. It's you got a lot of things going on, and so it's kind of funny to see how, where inertia lands on this. They definitely are landing on the side of the industry over the surfers. So you can see who they think whose opinion they want to respect more. Obviously, the side of the manufacturers and the big industry, but that's a whole nother video. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed the video, learned some stuff. I'm going to link the videos that I used and the article into this so you can do your own homework and learn more about this sport that we all love to do. And we'll see you in the next video.